Ancient Ceremony were founded in 1991 in southwest Germany by singer Chris Anderle and guitarist F.J. Krebs. They played their first live show in 92, followed by a demo tape entitled Where Serpents Reign in 93. This could still be described as death metal, with typical growls and melodic lead guitars. In 94, the second demo, Cemetery Visions, was released on a 3-inch mini-CD, first self-produced, then picked up by a label for reprint. Cemetery Visions showed growing variety and refinement. At this time, the British record company Cacophonous had a big success on their hands with the debut of Cradle of Filth, followed by the early works of Dimmu Borgir and Bald Sagoth, so they were looking for bands with a similar sound and mindset. They signed Ancient Ceremony for their debut album. In an interview with Eternity magazine, Chris mentioned that in the early days guitarist FJ was the main songwriter, while later keyboarder Stefan had the biggest creative input. This resulted in more classical and progressive influences and less death metal riffing. The lyrics revolve around vampirism, yet in a very poetic way, not in the style of a horror movie. Modesty wasn't really a thing in the world of Ancient Ceremony when they described the album themselves as a masterpiece of unique symphonic darkness. Under Moonlight We Kiss was still a bit uncertain in style, but it has one major flaw, and that's the artwork. With that pale beauty and blood and moonshine, it looks like the kitschiest slice of gothic metal. No fan of black metal would buy that just by the looks of it. The funny story behind it is that this lady named Morticia was the record company owner's girlfriend, so he kind of brought her into it and thus promoting her rather than the band. Nevertheless, the first step into public attention was done. Ancient Ceremony went on their first real tour with headliner Agato Daimon, which was mostly a learning experience. Then they recorded their second album. Not all had been well within the band. Singer Sandra had been fired due to personal issues, not her singing, and replaced with two new female vocalists, Cynthia and Erna. The second album also featured two new guitarists, Patrick and Mark. The band was aiming at more professionalism now and needed people who were dedicated to Ancient Ceremony. In an interview with Deftone magazine, bandleader Chris described the motivation of earlier members simply as too low to achieve these goals. This is the typical kind of struggle when a band goes from demos to albums and work gets more serious. Fallen Angel Symphony shows a band which is now sure of themselves. The album is less experimental than the debut and better produced. It's probably the peak in the band's achievements. It creates a variety of emotional situations, more like a classical opera than your average black metal album. Fallen Angel Symphony was followed by Synagoga Diabolica, released in 2000. A mini-album with 4 new songs, the re-recorded Choir of Immortal Queens and a cover of Metallica's Creeping Death. The contract with Cacophonous had ended, so they were back on the small indie label Alistair, who had distributed Cemetery Visions a few years earlier.
There is no place to hide from the siege.
The fifth CD by Ancient Ceremony, the third full-length, was put out by Armageddon Shadow, a rather insignificant Gothic label. With more spoken words and more epic feel, the Third Testament takes a step into the direction of Baal Sagoth, while certainly the aggression remains and the guitars deliver some great thrash metal riffs. The mixture of old and new is exciting to listen to. The band had managed to remain interesting over several releases without getting their raw edges polished like so many others. It fits into this picture that in 2003 Ancient Ceremony was sued by the Catholic Church for spreading blasphemy on their website. As far as I know, this legal dispute was settled without a penalty. Also, as a reaction to that, in 2004 Ancient Ceremony released their final EP, Puritan's Blasphemy Call, or PBC, with 4 new songs and a re-recording of God and Idol from Cemetery Visions. Since Ancient Ceremony seemed to be quite successful in Russia at the time, they made a deal with Russian label Ion for re-release of Synagoga Diabolica, The Third Testament and PBC. That was going to be their last record contract though. I haven't got an exact split-up date, but didn't find traces of the band after 2005 anymore. Singer Chris, according to his Facebook page, has got a boring normal life with kids and regular job these days. Since nobody seems to be interested in the legacy of Ancient Ceremony anymore, some of the records I talked about are meanwhile hard to find, but they are worth searching for. See you next time.